So if you look at a map of World War II, you see all the fighting in, Europe, the Pacific, but then you see this huge campaign in the North African desert.
Right, just this vast, seemingly empty stretch of sand and rock.
And you have to ask why.
Oh,
Why were these huge armies fighting tooth and nail over what looks like nothing between 1940 and 1943?
it really wasn't about the sand itself. It was about what that sand was guarding. The real prize, the strategic goal, was the Suez Canal in Egypt.
And for the British Empire, that canal was everything. It was their absolute lifeline.
Think about it. If you're shipping anything, troops, fuel, supplies, from Britain to India or Australia.
The Suez Canal is your shortcut. Without it, you have to go all the way around Africa.
Exactly. A journey that adds thousands of miles and, well, months of travel time. Immense risk. If the Germans and Italians took the canal, they could basically slice the British Empire in two.
And there's a second prize just as big, oil.
Huge. Control of North Africa is the gateway to the Middle Eastern oil fields. And without that oil, the Allied war machine just stops. Tanks, planes, ships, everything.
So losing Egypt might have meant losing the whole war.
It really might have. But the problem for every soldier there was that the desert itself fought back harder than any enemy. Just surviving day to day was a huge challenge.
The conditions were just brutal. I mean, you're talking about daytime temperatures that would soar past 100 degrees Fahrenheit.
Instant heat exhaustion. And then as soon as the sun goes down, the temperature plummets. You're shivering cold.
And the sand. Let's talk about the sand.
Oh, the sandstorms. They call them a kamsin. It would just sweep across and reduce visibility to zero. You couldn't breathe.
And this wasn't beach sand. It was this incredibly fine dust that was a genuine destroyer.
It ruined engines, it jammed weapons, contaminated food, and got into the water, which was already incredibly scarce.
Yeah, water was the real currency out there, wasn't it?
Absolutely. It was strictly rationed. And then you had the constant threat of disease from poor sanitation and just clouds of flies on everything.
So this land of extremes really demanded a very special kind of leadership.
It did. The brutal conditions meant that organization and adaptability were everything. And this brings us to one of the most famous rivalries in military history.
On the Axis side, you have General Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox.
A nickname he definitely earned. His tactics were incredibly clever, often completely surprising.
He was leading the Afrika Korps, right?
Yeah.
A force trained specifically for this kind of fighting.
Exactly. They knew how to handle the heat, how to keep vehicles running in all that sand. But Rommel's personal style was what really set him apart. He wasn't a general sitting in a headquarters miles away.
No, he was famous for leading from the front lines, which is highly unusual.
It is. It let him react instantly. His whole strategy was about speed, using his tanks to make these lightning strikes against the enemy's weakest points.
And that aggressive style actually earned him a lot of respect from the British soldiers he was fighting.
It did. He was seen as fighting a clean war. But his genius had this one huge critical flaw.
His supply line.
Always. He was constantly on a knife edge, practically begging his commanders in Germany for more fuel, more ammo, more tanks. He rarely got what he needed.
So the British needed a counter to this tactical genius. And that's where General Bernard Montgomery comes in.
Right, Monty. He takes over the British 8th Army, the Desert Rats, when their morale is at an absolute low point.
And he was the total opposite of Rommel?
A complete opposite. He was strict, he was meticulous, and he focused so much on planning and morale. He got that in a war of exhaustion. Discipline is your best weapon.
And he had one simple rule that changed everything.
It did. He refused to attack. Ever. Not until his army was fully prepared, rested, and critically had way more tanks and guns than the enemy.
So he was basically turning it into a math problem.
In a way, yes. He was transforming these disorganized forces into a disciplined machine. He wasn't trying to outfox Rommel. He was trying to crush him with overwhelming force in a battle of attrition that he knew Rommel couldn't win.
Let's talk about the tools they were using, the tanks.
The tank was king in the desert. The landscape is so flat and open, it's perfect for armored vehicles. Commanders use them, and this is a great phrase, like ships at sea, to maneuver and surround the enemy.
The British had the Crusader and then the American Sherman tank, which was a real workhorse.
A very reliable machine. The Germans had their Panzer III and IV, and, they often had better guns and thicker armor, especially at first. But the Allies almost always had more of them.
And what was life like inside one of those things?
Awful. Just imagine a cramped metal oven with 4 other guys, knowing that a direct hit gives you maybe seconds to get out before it erupts in flames. The pressure was unbelievable.
But for all the focus on the tanks and the commanders, the real deciding factor was something else entirely.
It was logistics. That was the real enemy for both sides.
It's the central paradox of this whole campaign, isn't it? Rommel could be the most brilliant commander in the world.
But it doesn't matter if you don't have gasoline to move your tanks 50 miles.
Everything, every gallon of fuel, every bullet, every can of food had to be trucked for hundreds of miles over these terrible, bumpy tracks.
It's just an incredible challenge. And the British had a huge geographical advantage here.
Their main supply port was in Egypt, so their supply line to the front was relatively short.
Meanwhile, Rommel's supplies had to start in Italy and cross the entire Mediterranean Sea.
A sea route that was his Achilles heel.
Absolutely. The British knew it. Allied planes and submarines were relentless, sinking ship after ship, carrying everything Rommel needed. What good is a better tank if it's just sitting in the desert with an empty fuel tank?
It's no good at all. It becomes a metal coffin.
Mm.
So victory really came down to which side could keep its trucks running.
That's it. It was a war of supply chain management, and you can see it play out perfectly in the big battles of 1942.
Starting with Rommel's high point, the Battle of Gazala.
This was classic Desert Fox. He pulls this brilliant flanking maneuver, swinging his tanks all the way around the British defensive line. Complete surprise.
It caused a huge Allied retreat, and it led to the capture of Tobruk.
And capturing that port was massive. It was a huge morale boost, but practically speaking, it shortened his supply lines, at least for a while.
This defeat sent shockwaves through the Allied command. Rommel was now getting dangerously close to the Suez Canal.
But his forces were exhausted. That supply issue was catching up again. And he was finally stopped at a place called El Alamein, the first battle of El Alamein.
And if you look at the geography there, you can see why.
You can. The British set up a defensive line from the Mediterranean Sea down to this massive, uncrossable salt marsh called the Qattara Depression.
It's basically a giant natural moat.
It is, which meant Rommel couldn't do his famous flanking moves. He had to attack head-on.
Which is exactly what Montgomery wanted.
Right. The fighting was brutal, a real slugfest, but Rommel was stopped cold. He had to dig in. And that was the end of the Axis advance into Egypt. For good.
So then Montgomery takes his time, builds up his forces for the counterattack.
He does. And the Second Battle of El Alamein in October 1942 is a totally different kind of battle. It's just overwhelming force.
He has over 200,000 soldiers, thousands more tanks and guns.
And he starts with this terrifying artillery bombardment. Over 800 guns just pounding the German and Italian lines.
But the real challenge was clearing the minefields, the Devil's Gardens.
Thousands and thousands of landmines. It took days under constant fire just to clear paths for the tanks.
But eventually the sheer weight of numbers just punched through.
It did. Rommel knew he was beaten. He was overwhelmed and out of gas. He began the long retreat west. It was a huge Allied victory, a real turning point in the war.
And as Monty is chasing Rommel across Libya, something else happens, Operation Torch.
Right. November 1942, American and British troops land hundreds of miles behind Rommel in Morocco and Algeria. The commander is Dwight D. Eisenhower.
And the goal here is to create a trap, right? A giant squeeze play.
Exactly. Catch the Axis forces between Montgomery's army coming from the east and Eisenhower's new army coming from the west.
The Americans were new to this, though. They had some tough fights at first.
They did, especially in the mountains of Tunisia. But they learned fast, they adapted, and they kept pushing the Germans into that trap.
So by early 1943, the Axis armies are completely cornered in Tunisia.
They're surrounded. Overwhelming numbers on land, and the Allied Navy has the sea completely blocked. There's no resupply, and there's no escape. Rommel himself had already left due to illness.
And this is where that supply crisis that had been haunting Rommel for years finally delivers the knockout blow.
His troops ran out of everything. Fuel, food, ammunition. They couldn't move, they couldn't fight. It was over.
In May 1943, over 250,000 German and Italian soldiers surrendered.
The war in North Africa was over, and it proved, for the first time really, that the German army could be beaten on the ground.
And that experience the Allies gained, how to coordinate a huge mobile war, how to manage the logistics, was vital.
It was. They applied all those lessons directly to the planning for the D-Day invasion of Europe. Military historians still study these battles for that very reason.
It shows that brilliant tactics don't mean a thing if you don't have a superior supply line.
This was a war won not just by brave soldiers, but by barrels of oil and the trucks that kept rolling.
The Desert War was really about keeping those trucks running.
And if you go there today, you can still find the resting remnants of that incredible effort just sitting out there in the sand.
See you next time.